Hi everyone, I'm back with the second hair tutorial. This time we're drawing realistic curly blonde hair using Faber Castell Polychromos pencils. The full list of materials are in the description below, and if you'd like to follow along, I do have the link to the reference photo in the description too. I cropped out most of the photo and focused on just the section of curls that can be found on the model's left shoulder. The colors I'll be using will be on the left of your screen. I also used a white Caran d'Ache Luminance pencil because it's more opaque, which means it shows up better over my darker colors. I have more hair tutorials coming up in the next week, so please subscribe so you don't miss out. So the first thing you want to do is make sure you have an accurate sketch. And then I'm going in with my light midtones like light yellow ochre and brown ochre to map out the direction of the hair. And then coloring the entire section with the color Ivory. And I repeat the process using hair-like strokes to build layers and to darken up either end of the section before moving on to the next section. So now I'm again using one of my lighter mid-tone colors to map out some of the shapes I've identified in the reference photo, as well as identifying some of the shadows and highlights before making the hair-like strokes for texture. Also, when doing this, make sure your pencils are sharp so you leave clean lines. So at this point you can see three strands that already look like they have some curve to them because either end of the strands are darker while the middle is very light, and it already looks like it has some shine to it. These lights and darks are what is called value. These are your highlights and shadows, and this is what's going to make your piece look three-dimensional. Now I'm going to start filling in and darkening some areas between these three strands to add some more shadow to make them look like they're separate from each other, yet still part of a larger clump of hair. So now I'm starting on a new section at the bottom, and I'm using the same techniques I did for the other sections. I'm starting out by using hair-like strokes on either end using a light hand and building up layers, while blending those colors with Ivory and repeating the process. So I'm starting by using a lighter mid-tone color like brown ochre and darkening either end of the curl, and with this section the ends seem to have more shadow to them, so I'm going to be going in with darker colors like walnut and a little bit of dark sepia because if you think about it, the ends are going to be darker because it's receding back and isn't hitting as much light, whereas the middle part of the curl is closer and will be catching a lot more light. If you understand how to shade a cylinder, it's basically the same idea. To know what colors to use, I just use my reference photo and pick colors that seem to reflect what I see in my reference. Some areas look more brown, and so I'll use more brown ochre, walnut, and dark sepia. Other areas look a little more red, so I'll use burnt sienna and dark sepia if I need to go darker with that color. And for blending into the highlights, I use a lot of light yellow ochre to transition into ivory and white to lighten up the ivory further if necessary. But in the beginning, you really want to focus on getting the values right. Choosing the right colors isn't what's going to make your piece look realistic. In fact, this is what makes art so interesting to me because several artists can work on the same exact subject, but interpret the same subject in different ways, including seeing different hues or colors. Yet all their pieces can all come out looking realistic. So if your curl doesn't look round enough, chances are your shadows on either end may not be dark enough, or the highlights might not be light enough. Also, when you do each section, there may be times it really doesn't look like hair, but don't worry about that. Just work on the values and making the hair-like strokes because as you build layers, it'll start to come out. And you really want to have a good foundation before adding in the details in the end. So basically, I'm just going to keep repeating the process for each section. For the hair towards the top, I'm using warm gray 4 to map out the direction of the hair. This is because in the photo I'm following, the hair isn't that saturated in those areas and it loses its brown hue, so it's more gray in the shadowed areas. Again, I'm focusing on a small section of hair at a time, keeping the middle part of that section light. So you may have noticed that I'm using different erasers. I use both a Tombow mono eraser and an electric eraser. The electric eraser is good for picking up more of the color, but with the Tombow mono eraser, I feel like I have more control. Neither one will erase color pencil completely, but if you keep your coloring light in the beginning, you can fix and make corrections. You can also add a small clump of stray hairs that are going in a different direction than the rest of the hair, which can add to the realism since not all of the hair should be going in the same direction. So this could break up the monotony. But before using any eraser, just be sure to clean it off on a scrap piece of paper to avoid smudging, which can be very difficult to fix. So keep in mind that there's shadow where the hair overlaps. So the parts of hair that are behind other clumps of hair will be darker, and sometimes there will be a quick transition to the highlights depending on where the light is coming from, especially with curly hair. So here's a good example of me drawing what looks more like an abstract triangular shape rather than hair. And this goes to show that some parts of the hair may not look like hair, but I'm following what I see in my reference photo rather than drawing how I think hair should look. So if you break down the drawing and look at each section, you'll notice that they all really look more like abstract shapes. If you can look at the hair and think of it as irregular shapes rather than hair, then this may eliminate the habit of just drawing lines or each individual hair, which will make the drawing look flat and stiff, and it won't have that three-dimensional look. So I just wanted to point out that I actually messed up on my sketch on the top right part of the hair, and I had to improvise since I had already laid down color pencil that was too dark to fix. I'm not sure how it happened, but I probably wasn't paying enough attention to my reference photo. This can happen, but if you understand the basic techniques of drawing hair, you'll be more than confident to just go with it and improvise. But this shows that you don't necessarily have to start over if you make a mistake. As an artist, you learn to find ways to fix all sorts of mistakes and problems. So now I'm ready to add some details. So I'm using my second lightest color, which is light yellow ochre, and some brown ochre to add flyaways around the hair. I use light pressure for this, and I use my reference photo to get an idea of what direction the flyaways are going in. But again, I'm not copying every single flyaway exactly. I'm just referencing my photo to get an idea of how they act, and I mimic that. Also, I use Ivory to add some very light hairs as well. So try to darken some of the flyaways with brown ochre to make some of them seem like they're closer, and keep some of the hairs lighter so it looks like they're further away. I'm also using my white luminance pencil to create flyaways within the hair. Make sure your pencil is nice and sharp for this. You may have to press a bit harder for those small hairs to show up over the darker colors, and also try to stay loose. This may take some practice, but these little details are what's going to make the hair look even more realistic. Now I'm just tweaking and adding more details and darkening some areas and adding highlights to other areas. Again, I'm using my reference photo to do this. I compare my piece to the photo and I see what adjustments need to be made, and I make those adjustments until I'm happy with it. I'm also burnishing some areas to smooth out any graininess, being careful not to lose any details. So burnishing just means that I'm pressing hard on my pencil to flatten the texture of the paper to leave a clean finish. The burnishing technique is usually the last layer, as the paper won't be able to pick up any more colored pencil. And once I'm happy with it, it's done. If you have any questions or suggestions, let me know in the comments section and I'll be happy to answer them. If you want to see more hair tutorials, I have more coming out in the next week, so please subscribe and I'll see you in the next tutorial.